call the meeting to order. We do not have a quorum tonight, so maybe we will get one more member before we get to anything, if we have to vote on anything tonight. Still go through the agenda tonight, but we just really can't vote on anything or make motions until we get a quorum. So we'll quickly review the agenda. We'll start out with public comments and then commissioners' comments to follow. Review and approve the January. We can look at the minutes, but we can't approve them. And then we'll have a presentation on the procedural justice, and that will be from anybody we know.
Sergeant Smith
Sergeant
and
Smith. I
Will
thought
Davey.
so. I didn't want to.
Will Davey.
And Will. Good. And then the director will be here shortly, and he will give his director's report, and then we will continue our conversation on the unmanned aerial device policy, and then we will have a discussion on outreach and engagement from the commission. With that, I will turn it over to Scott for public comments.
Okay. If there's anybody who would like to make a public comment, there's some blue forms in the back. Would anybody like to make any comments? Turn it back over to you.
I would like to acknowledge, we do have a Boy Scout in the audience. Are you here for a merit badge, or?
Yes.
Oh, good. Well, welcome. Would you like to tell us your name and?
Aaron.
Aaron? Yeah, thanks for coming, Aaron.
What?
I said thanks for coming.
And Will Davey's daughter's here.
And our other guest at the table is Will Davies' daughter. If you'd like to introduce her, Will.
This is Simran. She's interested in what I do and in what the commission does, so I brought her along.
Perfect. Great to have you.
Hello.
Thank you. With Claire, we do have a quorum. Maybe officially called the, sorry, did I
Right.
interrupt your process?
No, you didn't.
Okay.
Good, thank you.
No public comments. Move on to commissioners' comments, and we'll go around the table. So, can we start with you?
Sure. Good to be back. I'm excited to be here, and I think with my new position as the executive director for the City Club of Eugene, I'll be able to attend the evening meetings from here on out.
Good. So, Sean, our newest member.
It's really nice that we have quorum on my first day.
Just business, I filed Democratic primary for House District 11. I don't see any potential conflicts of interest, but if anybody has one, please bring them to my attention and I'll consider them when it comes up. Thank you.
No comment.
No comment.
My apologies for missing the meeting last month. I don't like to miss meetings.
No comments for me.
No comments.
Sean, I'm going to put you back on the hot seat. If you'd like to maybe just tell us a little bit about yourself and maybe why you wanted to join the commission.
Well, there are a few things that bring me here. I outlined a few of them in my application. My father's a veteran. I live a block away from Whitebird in the heart of downtown. And, you know, I was in 8th grade when Columbine happened. A few years later, I lived in Aurora when the theater was shot up. I had friends who went there. So that's sort of what brings me and my interest into focus here.
Welcome. Thank you. With that, we'll move into review and approve of the January minutes. Anybody have any questions or comments? I do have one. I'm not sure the detective Chris Mackey is his real name, or if it's Chris. There's a T at the end of it.
Thank you.
Christ Mackey.
That'd be an elevation of status, right?
I wasn't sure if I was calling you the wrong name. Anybody have anything else?
Nope.
Looking for a motion?
move to approve minutes.
Got seconds? Any other discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
I abstain, I wasn't here.
Oh, yeah, you can. No.
By majority of the quorum?
You only have 6 votes. It's okay, you can approve them next time.
We'll approve next time.
Okay.
Sorry.
Technicality.
So we will move into the procedural justice presentation. Sergeant Smith and Will are going to lead that, so if
We can do that.
So we're going to be using the TV here. For those that you want, make yourself comfortable so that you can actually see it. It might be easier.
And you can talk loud enough so I can hear you.
Sure.
I'd like to introduce myself as an EPD volunteer. In fall of 2014, I came here as a volunteer. There weren't any available volunteer jobs that I liked or that I thought were well suited. To make a longer story short, Chief Kearns and then Captain Durr invented a position for me of researching these topics. And so for the next year or so, I read everything I could find, which is actually a lot on these topics. And I also did a lot of police ride-alongs. The first of which was with our own Chris Mackey. That was my first ride-along. Somewhere in 2016, I don't remember exactly where, I was invited to participate in the trainers training at the State Police Academy, DPSST. I was there in a class that was full of police chiefs and sheriffs from all across Oregon. I was the only civilian, the only sort of community member there, so it was a bit of an adventure for me. And then we come to this presentation. As far as I know, I've been the only community member invited to take part in this kind of training. And I think EPD is the first to include a community member in this sort of training. So it's been an interesting sort of starting of something new. So that brings us up to date.
And for those of you that don't know me, I'm Sergeant Julie Smith, and I actually am the sergeant of the downtown bike team. But I also have other duties assigned, and this is one. Will joined myself in a team of Eugene sworn officers that did take the facilitation of this course. And so, and yes, Will was the only community member in there, and since it was very unusual, and it turned out to be very beneficial in many communities and departments, and sheriff's offices now included a community member as part of their team as they implement this training at their departments and sheriff's office. So anyway, so I guess we're trendsetters. Yeah. Okay, so we're going to go through. So this course is a 6-hour course, and we're going to we condensed it into a 45-minute presentation for you guys tonight. And what we're going to kind of present it in a fashion of, I thought it would be interesting for you to know how we are implementing it here at the department and what the content of the course is. And then we can have time for question and answer, okay? So, first of all, what is police legitimacy? And so we'll kind of talk about that, but police legitimacy and procedural justice came out of the 21st Century Policing, the task force that was assembled, and this was one of the recommendations from that task force that police departments or law enforcement related departments implemented within their departments and within their community. Eugene, hello. Eugene jumped right on this, and we actually included it as a component to our strategic plan, and it's actually one of the goals of the strategic plan that all the employees that we try to measure how many employees and try to get, make sure that all the employees in the department, non-sworn and sworn, have the training. So what, do you want to cover up what it is?
No, go to the next slide.
Well,
I think
Okay, so basically, cover what, I'm gonna yell over you because I
That's
can
okay,
only
Judy,
be
go
so
right
far
ahead.
away
Yeah.
from the TV and then I can't see, that's my age now. So anyway, police legitimacy is just ensuring that the policies and procedures that we have in place and the way we train our officers are fair, and that that we're transparent in the way that we do our jobs. And so that will increase the community trust within the community that we work in. So, as I said, we included it as an actual goal in our strategic plan, and we actually moved forward with implementation last year. And we felt the recommendation in the 21st century policing is that we have it be a top-down implementation, and we actually did do that. We presented it to the senior staff. They reviewed the content of the course by taking the course, and then recommended to implement it. We would then went forward and actually implemented it at our command leadership training where all the supervisors were involved. And then from there, we implemented it at all the in-service trainings for the police officers, and we had the supervisors that actually had received the course take part in the training with the police officers so that it inspired the discussions to talk about transparency and trust and what leads to community trust. Yes.
Is that a frozen puzzle?
Yes, it is a frozen puzzle.
You have kids?
Yeah, good discussion. Good. So, most of this training and what this training is actually the way it's devised is to actually increase the discussions with the police officers about what is trust, what the way we do our work, what is fairness, what isn't fair. And so, in this photograph is, right here you see lieutenant as working with some officers and other supervisors to assemble a puzzle. And what this activity was is to exemplify what is fair. And so groups were broken up, and this group got a frozen puzzle of only like 64 pieces. But the table next to them got like a 500 or 1,000 piece puzzle, and they had to wear kitchen mittens to try to assemble it. And so, the statements and comments that I heard, well, this isn't fair. Why do I have to wear mittens and they have a smaller number of puzzles? Which then created the dialogue about what is fair and what the policies and procedures and the way we do business. Is it fair within the community?
So you understand this was set up to be manifestly unfair. And everybody got it.
So to date, we have 177 sworn officers or sworn employees have received the training, and 23 non-sworn have received the training. And as we move forward, we'd like to try to make that eventually 100% of the employees in the department. So in order to be a good leader, you need to be an anthropologist, meaning that you need to look back at what has shaped and molded the community, what events have happened that have maybe created some of the policies on why we are doing business now. And so with segues on how did we get here today?
Sure. It is true, I think, that in some places in the world, the police may not be your friend. My own personal friends, India can be that way, Mexico can be that way, and Baltimore is that way, I think. There was a big article in the New York Times 2 days ago. There was a squad of Baltimore police that were discovered to be doing robberies, home invasions, and they were selling drugs and firearms on the street. And this had been going on for at least a year. This while Baltimore Police Department is being scrutinized by the Department of Justice.
Yeah, so we acknowledge that
So-
there's events that have happened in the community, sometimes in communities that cause maybe police not to be trusted.
For sure.
Fortunate in this community that we don't have a lot of that and we have a good relationship. But, what historical events have kind of happened? You have a lot of the rights and the events that happened during the civil rights movements.
I'd like to mention the one on the right there. The man in the middle is from Mississippi. The other two came from New York to take part in civil rights demonstrations. All three of them were in a car. They were arrested by a deputy sheriff who did not take them to jail. He took them to the Ku Klux Klan, and they were murdered and their bodies dumped. The incident is a topic of a pretty good movie called Mississippi Burning. Have you heard of it? Willem Dafoe and Gene Hackman. It was on cable a month or so ago, actually. But it's actually, a pretty decent movie if you're interested in that era. Those other pictures are from Selma, Alabama.
And although these events happened in the 1960s.
Mid-60s, yeah.
That they still resonate in some people's minds in our community. Again, in 1970, Kent State University.
President Nixon at this point, had just ordered troops into Cambodia. There was a terrific national reaction against that, lots of demonstrations, including this one at Kent State, where they had demonstrators burned the ROTC building. The governor called out the National Guard. And on this day, the National Guard opened fire on groups of students, killed 4 of them, and 9 more were severely injured. The immediate national reaction was one of outrage. This photograph was on the front page of every paper in the country the next day. It was tremendously impactful. And the immediate consequence that was evident was that demonstrations became bigger, more energetic, and potentially more violent. So, in case in point, one that happens the next week.
Right, and
Right up the street.
although this event and the Mississippi event did not happen here in this community, we are all aware of those events, and through media and through movie, we are all reminded of them, which brings us closer to home here, Portland State University, the incident that happened on this day.
There was it's only a week later from Kent State. It was a big demonstration in the park blocks at Portland State, the aim of which was to shut down PSU. They succeeded. They did shut it down for a day. They actually had permits to occupy park blocks, but the Parks Commissioner called to cancel that permit. He called the wrong person. The message never got through to the people in charge of this demonstration.
On the scene, yeah.
And
On-site.
the Parks Commissioner, the police chief, and the mayor ordered the park blocks cleared. Interested captains that were on the scene called 4 times to try to get that order rescinded, but it didn't happen. So they ordered the riot troops basically to come through. There were about 100 demonstrators. 33 of them were hospitalized, and 3 or 4 policemen were hospitalized as well. The impact on police legitimacy was enormous in the city of Portland. The next morning, there were 5,000 people at the city hall demonstrating against the police department. And I know some people at Portland State. I talked about this with them. They told me that people at Portland State still talk about this,
To this day, yeah.
referring to the Portland stormtroopers, and in pretty derogatory terms. It was a black day for Portland policing.
I would say the same thing. I've been in the car for 23 years. I was born 4 years after Kent State, and
Yeah.
there are still people who talk about Kent State.
Oh, yeah.
And it actually has had some positive effects on the way we train.
That's probably true.
But it's still very much part of the culture that
Yeah.
Exactly, which molds the policies in the way of why why we do business differently, and with some things that we learned from these events that now we implement differently, so that.
But
we try to
certainly it
prevent
contributes on the part of the populace to the fear and anxiety around having contact with police.
So, Now we come to more closer to home. We actually have the 1990s for those community members here that were here in the 1990s. We had a lot of protest and, some civil unrest. And I have a couple of videos I want to show, although I'm not sure I can do the link from this. Can I do it from this one?
There you go.
Yeah, can you double click on for me?
This
Up
one?
there, up at the top, if you just hit those links at the top.
Oh,
Come on, spool it. So this video is a short clip from an actual film that actually received some awards at some of the one of the film awards. It's called At the Tree Falls, and this is a
PBS, the
small
home of
snippet from the
independent
movie.
voices.
It documents an incident that occurred here in
Take a look at
June
what's
1st
coming
here
in
in
the months
Eugene.
ahead. Hard-hitting,
FBI knew how dangerous the lotus was.
thought-provoking,
Hopefully this ad will be done.
unforgettable. He's the science teacher we all wish we had. PBS previews the best of PBS indies. Only on PBS.
Okay, that's. Can everyone hear it okay?
In the summer of '97, just a few months after the ranger station fires, an event took place in downtown Eugene that for many shook up the debate.
There was this place downtown, had 40 old heritage trees, just beautiful, and they were going to put in a parking lot for Symantec, this big corporation next door, and they were going to cut down the trees to do it.
Activists began mobilizing to save the trees. But as they prepared to take the issue to the next city council meeting, the city suddenly announced that it would cut the trees one day before that public hearing.
On Sunday morning, about 2:30 in the morning, about 11 people went up into the trees to prevent them from being cut.
We just went and did it, hoping that we could stave off the cutting for one day until that public hearing.
Just for one day, so the citizens could talk to the city council the next day about saving them.
They came in right away wearing riot gear and gas masks and stuff like that.
So bang, bang, bang on the door at 8 in the morning. Some kid says, get out there, they're pepper spraying them in the trees, get your camera, you gotta get there. I mean, they're pepper spraying them right now.
Hang in there, Jim!
They came up in a fire truck bucket and they cut my pants leg up to my groin so they could spray my leg with pepper spray.
Cutting, their pants and pepper spraying them and and while they're hanging from the limbs 40 feet up, people were on the street looking at this and going, what the do you think you're doing? And so people were radicalized. They would start jumping on the fence and going, quit that.
They're tear gassing the crowd and pepper spraying the crowd. It was just crazy, frantic scene that day.
And they used about 12 to 15 cans on Slim. And he stayed up for, I think, about 6 or 7 hours, man.
And then they flushed me with a bunch of water, took me to the hospital, and then took me to jail. And so for the next 35 hours, I was soaking in pepper spray. My hands were orange for a week.
And so the argument that you need to work within the system was pretty well dashed by what the cops did on that day in Eugene. And June 1st was really the day that pissed off a lot of people in this town.
I think that's the end of that. Yeah, I'm gonna have to pause it or. Let's just close this one. Okay, and then we'll go. So, I mean, we look at it and it's ugly now, It's hard to watch. But we learned from that, and we changed our ways, the way that we do things. And from that, obviously, the 90s, we had a lot of responses to a lot of protests, and it was definitely a different time than it is now. This is happened at one of our local parks. Again, this is an independent edited film. So in this sense, this is a hemp festival that was planned. They didn't get permits to have this event in this park, and they were told not to have the event, but they decided to have the event anyway. At some point, it became a call for service, and the cops were ordered to go in and shut down the event. And that's what's going to happen.
And that's fine. It's a good ghost. It's a good spirit. You know, good. There's good peaceful spirit here. You know.
Can you guys do us a favor? Is that camera on? No, right now. Is it recording my voice? No. Make sure that it's turned off. Well, I'm going to move in. What seems to be the major concern by the police officers?
That people are violating the city code against vending in a park without a permit. If they had a permit, the city would then get 6% of their profits.
Is this all right this way?
No.
I thought it was all right if it didn't have a structure.
Yeah, that's what it seemed like, but they told us we had to take down two.
Take down two.
We had to take everything down.
Oh, okay. So
we're not-
this is illegal, right here?
Yeah, it's all illegal.
It's a shame they're getting paid a salary for just standing around deciding when to bust everybody, you know? It's those people there have made their things that they, want to sell. I mean, it's something that they like to do, make a living from it. And
For me,
I don't know. It's a shame. It really is.
So what's going on over there?
Well, he thinks he has the right to be here, and if they come and tell him that they're gonna write him a ticket or whatever, he's gonna ask for the ordinance that says that he can't be here or whatever. I think he's just gonna...
Have they warned him already?
Yeah, he's already been warned, so he'll probably take the ticket.
Well, we're having a beautiful gathering here. The vibes are high, but some guys in uniforms came around intimidating everybody to take. They told some people their illegal vending. They told me I had an illegal structure.
What's illegal about the structure?
They wouldn't tell me. I asked them, what Parma was doing, and they said it was illegal. So who knows?
He's riding my bike past, taking our clothing out of here because we've been kicked out, or we were going to get a citation. And right there, the cops were riding up the path in their car. They're ready to rock and roll. And it's like, man, in Eugene, wow, I think that's the first time I've ever encountered anything like that in Eugene. Hopefully, everybody's real nice and cooperative today.
You're packed up and gone by the time I get in.
I'm not doing anything.
You can certainly leave.
I'm not doing anything.
What's your last name here?
I'm not going to accept the
What's
ticket.
your last name,
I'm not
ma'am?
accepting the ticket. I'm not violating anything.
Are you refusing to identify
Sir,
yourself?
you told me earlier I could not have a structure and I could not sell it. Why do I have to? Is there a law that says I have to identify myself to you? What difference is it going to make? You're going to write my name on the citation?
Are you refusing to identify yourself?
Okay, my name is Jerry Cole. My name is Cole, K-U-L-E. And I'm not taking the ticket.
Sir, you're under arrest.
Oh shit, man! Fuck you!
Man, I wish I had my gun too. Motherfuckers.
He fucking grabbed me by the throat. That's why I'm grabbing by the throat. I had my baby in my arms. I have something to explain. Because this fucker told me.
Okay,
They're not representing me. You know what these
Sorry, I
guys
apologize
like
for
to
the
the heart? That fucking means stone cold.
So, we kind of talk about, we use that as a dialogue with the class to then kind of talk about what things differently could we have done or what, to approach that situation, that it can turn out differently. And different policies and procedures that in response to those situations. So, and then once we have dialogue about that, we do a group exercise with the groups, and where we broke out into groups again, and we really sat down with them and said, okay, now list, why did you become a police officer? And so the groups sat around and listed all the reasons why personally they became a police officer. And then when they were done with that exercise, then they talked about, well, what are your expectations if you're a victim or you want a police response? What would you like? What are the characteristics of the officer that you would like to see when they arrived at your home to take a police report? And so we then had them list that out, and each group got up and talked about what they wanted. And so here's some of the things that they wrote, and really they wanted somebody. They talked about that they became a police officer because they wanted to help people. Because they wanted to have a job where they got to do different things. The day was different. Every day was a new, different thing to approach. And then, when they talked about what they expected from a police officer if they were the victims, they wanted somebody that was professional, polite, treated them with the golden rule. Many of the things that our community wants to see from our police department. So it was good dialogue to talk about why that's important, that good customer service is important, because we want to be treated just the way the golden rule. So, yep. Yes.
Can you tell me what that says on the bottom left?
You're gonna make me use my glasses. It says paid to fight. And we talked about it was a safe environment to be honest and truthful about what some of them had fun with it.
Good vacation time and early retirement. Those are good reasons.
So, all right. So, can the police do their job without community support? And the answer is not really. We can. It's just a lot harder. Anything you want to say about this one?
No, not really.
Again, what is police legitimacy? The public view of the way the police is and their authority and how they use it, and whether they feel that it's fair. When we address problems, are we addressing them in a manner that's respectful and that is fair?
And I'd like to add, big red letters, this is about the perception of the people being dealt with. It's about the community perception of how the police behave. And I tried to emphasize that throughout the training, because it's so important to realize that that really is what we're talking about, the community perception of police throughout.
Yeah, and then, how do you measure community perception? So, we took, these graphs are kind of useful. We've really talked and used them as dialogue, is that, can you do things that are legitimate and legal, is where we want to be, but you can be extreme in one way or the other, which could then create things. Like, we could tase somebody in a situation, and then the person falls and hurts themselves, and then is that lawful? Yeah, it was lawful to tase them, but is it awful? Did it look awful, and did it leave a bad taste in the community's mind when they saw it?
Also, I mean, this immediately shows you that legitimacy is not the same as legality. Because you can have legitimate perception where it's not legal or where it is legal. So, and in the training, we had people think of examples of each of these. Lawful but awful would be that episode at Portland State. What the police did was legal, but it was awful. And it had an awful impact on the public perception of policing there.
And again, tactics. You know, we want to be using good tactics. Where we want it to be is to use good tactics and be legitimate, right? But we could, you know, if we're not legitimate, you know, what are the offsets of that happening? DOJ oversight, you know, civil disorder, maybe some lawsuits. So, to the other extreme, if we don't hold people accountable, you know, the hug a thug, you know, is that, you know, if we never arrest somebody or never hold them accountable for their behaviors, is that going to make it where nobody respects or respects authority? So that's not good either. There has to be a balance.
I take it that good tactics here means something that works and works well. But things that work might or might not be legitimate in the eyes of the public. And of course, the ones that aren't legitimate in the eyes of the public can really cause trouble for the police department. And we could give examples of each quadrant pretty easily.
Okay, so how do you gain police legitimacy and procedural justice? So, do you want to cover this?
Sure. Well, we know what justice is, I think, all of us. Here it's defined for us, use of authority and power to uphold what's right, fair, and lawful. I think of procedural justice as sort of justice in motion, justice in progress or procedure. And we can go on to, this is interesting, I think there's a lot of research on this, which I could bore you with for hours probably. But the thrust of this slide is that the assessment made by a community member of an encounter with police is a combination of the outcome of the encounter and the process. And research shows that the outcome matters much, much less than the process. And there are a lot of interesting bits of research on this.
Yeah, how were they treated during the contact? Were they treated with respect, and was it fair? And was the customer service good?
So it's much less important whether you get the ticket or not than it is how you were dealt with when the officer pulled you over. That sort of thing is established over and over.
Yeah, and a good example is that even if I did a traffic stop, and I've had this happen, and you know, I clearly explained myself, explained the reason, gave the person the ability to have a voice, to, you know, maybe have an explanation of why they were doing what they were doing. I gave them the ticket, but at the end, they thanked me for the kindness and the fairness that they, even though they got a ticket and it, you know, they were going to have to pay a fine eventually, perhaps, for that. They still thanked me for the interaction that we had.
This just repeats the previous point, that the primary concern really is how the police are exercising their power, how it is they exercise their authority. The 4 principles, we went into great detail in the full training on this: voice, neutrality, respect, trustworthiness. Essentially, the person being dealt with by police needs to be given voice. And again, it's all about their perception, so they need to perceive that they're being given the chance to speak and to explain their side of the story. The police officer needs to be neutral, that is, be seen not to be taking sides in any case. They need to be respectful and trustworthy. The last 3, the best way I think to achieve those is to actually be neutral and to be respectful and to be trustworthy. I think people can perceive that pretty well.
So then we led up to another group activity where we actually had them break into groups and talk about what are some of the words that police use to describe perhaps clientele that they use, that they come in contact on a day-to-day basis. And then in turn with that, the next thing that they did is what words do residents use to describe the police and how did that make them feel? And the concept behind this is that if we refer to, you know, in our day-to-day, when we're not with the public, derogatory towards them, perhaps that's gonna make us have biases against them and probably maybe affect the way that we treat them. And the same is that, you know, we highlighted that what does it feel like when we're called names in those situations? And the example I use is that sometimes I get called a Nazi, you know, and what that makes me feel. And I'm farthest from that, but, you know, community members sometimes, you know, do those things. And how does that make me feel? And does that experience then perhaps mold me on how I'm going to act the next time? You know?
You understand that most of the words in both groups were not flattering, attractive kinds of words. There were some exceptions in both groups of words that you wouldn't mind being called, you know, but they were in a minority, like 3 or 4 words out of 50 were like that.
Right. And the whole point of the activity was to highlight, you know, really the golden rule, and to realize that, you know, we may feel and have our feelings hurt also for names that are called, but is it right for us then to call them names?
I think it had a good consciousness raising effect, actually, for me, but for others as well.
So yeah, we wanted to show. So we wanted to show an example of a video of where, you know, procedural justice, I think, is a good example. Although, you know, this is one where the outcome was an arrest, but I'd like to kind of listen and pay attention that, you know, was the person allowed to have a voice? Was there neutrality used there? Was it trustworthiness and respect? So this is a video out of Spokane Police Department. What does it say?
Wanting me to sign in.
Yeah, this is where we might have a problem because you signed in and I didn't, so. I don't know how I'm gonna get past that because it's under, I'd have to be under my profile. I think I know how to get.
How often is this training done? Is it a repeating training, or is it one that's done once for the
Well, you know, the brand new officers, this is like the curriculum, they're getting the procedural justice and police legitimacy training at the academy, at the police academy. And the reason we put everyone through here at the department, because we needed to train all those that, like me, that I've been here for almost 22 years. And so we have a spectrum of, you know, brand new officers to officers that have been here 25, 30 years. So all the answer is all the new officers get it right off the bat.
But would you do it again? I mean, would you do it like 2 years later to kind of refresh their thinking?
I don't have an answer to that. I suppose it would depend on the new police chief.
Right.
I would think that some version of it, perhaps shorter, might be a good sort of reminder.
What I've seen so far in the training, more or less dynamics, is that certain topics that they program into review every few years in the training cycles. Things like sexual harassment, things that have a high level of sensitivity for the community. Of course, I'm just making an assumption here. They've really been to the first round of training. We're still trying to accomplish that 100% level. I've not had a conversation with them on that yet, but I think that what will come out of that is this is a topic that's not going to go away. It's very current. It's part of the 21st century policing, and it's not something you just do and forget about. My assumption will be that it will be one of those topics that will have a periodic review, not every year. Because new things are going to develop out of it. The more you know about something, the different way you have looking at it. So I would be my assumption, but I would suggest you just, if you can't get to it, just describe it. Go on. Computer.
You got there now.
I'm close.
You think you got it?
Working on my flexibility exercises here. Darn it, so close.
I think half of
Maybe.
it now is just that the computer's a little bit slow.
Right.
That's good.
Well, we're not gonna watch someone get tasered, are we?
There you go.
It's not ugly.
I watched enough of those videos when I used to work for the ACLU.
Okay, if I can't get this, then let's just move on. Hope that didn't.
Yeah, let's just move on.
All right.
Okay. Thank you.
Where's my clicker? Sorry about that, technical difficulties.
Good video.
To kind of
Good
describe
only
the
if you're not
video
the one
is that
paying
the individual is a very buff, large man who's going through kind of a crisis at the time and is perhaps intoxicated, and they give him a voice and ask him, ask him what his name is. They do a really good job of giving the opportunity for him to have a voice, and they do begin to effect an arrest, and he begins to resist wanting to be taken into handcuffs. They talk him through the whole entire thing. They do have to end up tasering him, and they do end up getting handcuffing him. But at the end, as soon as they get him handcuffs, he describes, "Boy, I don't want to have that ever done to me again, but I understand why you did it." And he was actually thanking them at the end of the arrest for actually helping him and understanding that he's, obviously the intoxication is making him act in a way that he probably wouldn't if he wasn't in that situation. But they were glad that they were there to help him. So, it kind of gave a good example of a situation where, he was given a voice, they were respectful, they treated him with dignity, although the outcome was that he still had to be arrested. Yes.
What year did that occur?
It's recent, I'm not sure, just
It's
like
within the
about a
last-
year ago.
Within the last couple of years?
Yeah.
And we're gonna email this PowerPoint out, so you'll have, oh, great, thanks.
Yeah, if you choose to want to watch it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, and then, you saw the picture earlier about the puzzle exercise to demonstrate and get them to have that feeling about fairness and what's fair and what's not fair. And so the groups are broken up, and so what is fair and what's not fair, and so, this group, all of them had to wear oven mittens while they put the puzzle together. And they got a very large amount
Some of them
pieces.
got a 1,000-piece puzzle, and one had a 53-piece puzzle.
One had some puzzle pieces missing.
One had a 60-piece puzzle, but a piece was missing, so they couldn't complete it. Couldn't finish it. It was unfair, definitely unfair. What interested me, this is an aside, but what interested me personally is that despite the manifest unfairness of it, and you can see it from the beginning, all the police officers energetically took part. They all
Wanted to win.
They all tried.
Participated.
You know, all participated and all tried.
Under what, even in the toughest circumstances, none of them gave up
They
and said,
don't
I'm
quit.
not doing this. And that's how we do our job, is that even under the toughest circumstances, we don't just quit and say, I'm done and I'm walking away, kind of thing. It's, we're resilient, and our job is to protect the community.
In my life at the university, you would never see that. You would never see that kind of determination to do the job, no matter what. And this slide is kind of a reminder that police on average deal with a small portion of the population, 3 to 6%, over and over and over. They can lose sight of the fact that most of the community is law-abiding and supportive of police, receptive to police authority. There's a hazard for police of becoming cynical about the community they live in. And this slide connected with a whole section on that in the full training, but we don't have any more of it here.
So how important is it to have procedural justice within internal within a department and external with our community? It's fair. It's important to have it both. We want the employees to feel that they're valued and that they're treated respectfully, and that our policies are fair, and that if they do, discipline is fair and equal, and that we make fair decisions, and that we explain our actions. That we're transparent. So, the big section about the bank account, okay? And what is a bank account in a police department? And that's each encounter that police officers have on a daily basis is either a deposit or a withdrawal into our bank account, meaning that bank account is trust. And so each contact is important to increase that trust and legitimacy within our community. And one thing we really talked a lot about with the officers, are we making a deposit or withdrawal every time you have a contact?
There's also a question in any community, I think, of how much do you have in the bank? Do you have anything in the bank? I mean, would you get a sense of whether the police in general are trusted or not?
So, what it's like to work in a community where there have been an abundance of withdrawals. Even though maybe we weren't involved in something that was a withdrawal, but we all then are impacted that for a period of time afterwards. And what is, that's, that affects how we feel and how whether, we're valued and, how sometimes how we react, because we're all human, right? And images are powerful. So what do you feel and when you see this picture? It's okay, you guys can interact. What do you feel? Do you feel scared of the police? What?
A while ago, there was a picture of a black woman standing there while riot police sort of fell back from her. This is like the exact opposite. That was my first thought.
Right. So, I feel compassion and empathy there, he's doing his job, but yet in this situation, and the backstory on this is this little boy was standing there with a sign that said, I think it said something like, can't we all hug, or I need a hug, or something. And so the police officer went over there and gave him a hug. And he was actually, the kid was crying, and I think it was, this was recent with, after some of the protest after the inauguration, I think is what, and some of
That's a Portland police officer. Some of you know him.
Yeah. And there's a bigger backstory to it, is that officer, was the subject of some instability in his department, and even though he was going through a lot of stress himself, he still took the time to go over and have this interaction with the community member. And this photo was on, I think it made national news.
Yeah.
So, what photos, these photos are, I went to the internet and put in the Eugene Police Department, and this is the photos that pop up. you know, what do we do a lot of good things for our community here, and our community, I feel, you know, as an officer that's been here almost 22 years, I feel pretty supported by my community and feel good, and I'm very proud to work here. And so, you know, in the upper left, we're serving dinner at a holiday, this past Christmas holiday dinner out at the service station. In the top right, we sponsored a family that was actually living in a vehicle, and the temperatures were below 20 degrees, and this was on Christmas. We sponsored a motel room, and many of the officers in that photo had, with their own money, purchased Christmas gifts for those kids. And so anyway, then, you know, the community outreach response, where we go out and seek to help, you know, highest utilizers to address their underlying needs, so that to help them be in a better situation, which has really shown to reduce their recidivism. You know, make every encounter count, and that's important that we try to instill in the officers, is that every time we have a contact with a community member, it's important no matter what, because it's a deposit in our bank account of trust.
I had the sense that there was really good reception of this idea too. I think people immediately accepted it and thought that, yeah.
And it really goes back to why police officers become police officers, is because they too care about people and want to help people. And so why does this training and why does trust matter, and procedural justice and police legitimacy? Because it increases community trust. And if, you know, that community trusts us, then we're going to work in collaboration and cooperation with each other. They're going to support us when we need the support. And, you know, there's going to be less to complain about if we're doing our job, you know, fair and a good job every day, right? And in both respect, it's going to decrease stress in the community and fear of the police, and it's going to decrease our stress of knowing that we have the support from the community. And so that kind of wraps up. We wanted to make sure we left time for questions. If you guys have any questions on how the implementation went, what was the reception, how you feel about the material.
So we can start a queue if we have a lot of questions, but if anybody has anything?
You answered my only question already in the queue, which was, did anybody refuse to participate in the puzzle activity?
Nobody refused. Yeah.
Oh no, that became very competitive.
So,
that's right. I saw police officers get up on the table to try to do it faster. I think you were probably one of them.
I was there.
Anyway, we appreciate your time and letting us present that to you.
Marty had a question.
Oh, wait, sorry.
Just a quick comment. I settled a lot more cases through settlement conferences with a judge than I ever did through juries. What I took away from that is it's less about people wanting the formal procedural rules than having a sense of fairness about the process. What they wanted was not necessarily the jury reading their rights and all that stuff. What they wanted was the sense of being heard by a judge. Even though this was not the judge who was going to sit on their case, the judge had no authority to impose a settlement or anything. It was definitely that sense of being heard. And so in the field, it's, hey, can we create a space where tactically people can feel like they're heard, whatever that makes sense there. So I appreciate it. I think it's a great thing to train people on. And, it is interesting now that we have the video cameras. They're good. I also sometimes wonder if they're going to impede more informal conversations. I think it's a net good overall.
I don't see that. I mean, taking from my experience on being on the department when we didn't have video cameras, and actually being here in the 90s when Cop Watch was the center of the attention, and I had cameras being thrust in my face at all times, and is that I think that we've really evolved as a police department, and I think that maybe back in the 90s that maybe officers were more resistant that oh, Big Brother is going to be watching us all the time. I think now officers don't want to do their job without the cameras. And, I think that we have trust and that it's going to show that we're doing a good job, and that I think it really holds us accountable to make, to do a good job and be respectful in the golden rule.
I have Claire, Scott, and I put myself in the queue.
I don't have any questions, just thanks for sharing this, and thanks for making time on our agenda for us to see this very summarized version of a much longer training.
We asked for 6 hours.
Yeah. I think it's really illustrative and informative, and I like the starting with context, looking back to come forward to see where we're going in the future. I think
Right, and to
that's
remind
really
us
valuable.
not to go backwards, in the way we respond to things. So, thank you very much.
We have a couple more. You don't get to.
Oh, wait.
To leave. I know you're trying to get out of here. Scott is up, and then I have one comment.
So I like the idea of the bank.
Yeah.
Right, deposits, debits. And I guess how do you measure that?
I must have been
Have
calling
you
my
given
phone.
thought
Thank
to
you very
that
much.
in terms of what's the community's view today, and what's your target? How do you pursue those?
The most obvious thing you can actually measure is the number of complaints and sort of quality of the complaints you're getting. Otherwise, it would take a professional team to come in and examine those kind of things.
I think one of the ways that that question was posed on when we look at the community outreach response team is that we put a video out on social media, and within a week we had over 12,000 views and likes on that, which was an indicator of the perception of how we are working with the population, of homeless or highest utilizers, and seeing that interaction happening was very positive in the community. And primarily, there were thousands of comments, and if you look at social media, there isn't always positive things when there's pictures of police. There's always got to be somebody that's going to make some type of a negative comment, but primarily all the comments were positive.
There's been lots of sort of anecdotal response. I've had police officers stop me in the grocery store and talk to me about the presentation they saw. Always, the ones who stop me are always in favor of it and approving of it. So, to me, that's a little measure of it, but nothing you could say officially.
I think it's a great program. Thank you for showing us.
Sure.
What was the video?
Excuse
What
me?
was the video, not to jump in? What was the video that you
Oh,
mentioned?
the community outreach response team, we did it was like a 3-minute video of the field work that we do and explaining what the team is doing. You can actually find it on the internet, find it on Facebook, we post it on Facebook, so we could put in community outreach response team and actually.
And we'll send it out. Carter will send it out. She'll send out this presentation too at our weekly meetings. So,
thank you.
So I just want to say, I think this is a great presentation. I think it's a great move. One thing that strikes me is when we watch the Eugene police on the hemp festival, I grew up with a police department that when you showed the officers getting stuff thrown at them and they moved away, and I don't know where they went to, but where I grew up is Long Beach, California, those police would have just turned and called for backup, and that part would have looked a lot different.
Would have been
than
a lot
that.
of blood.
So I say that because I think one thing we don't think about in Eugene is that the police department, I think, has always been ahead of its time in the way it does things and the way it acts, and that has always been proactive in trying to become a better police department. And that video which just showed me that really, even back in those days, the officers used their heads more than their brain.
Anecdotally, one of those is my husband, so.
They came back though, right? The
Um,
police came back with riot gear and made arrests.
I'm not sure that actually happened. So, but I'd have to confer with my husband who was there, to actually, I could report back to you what actually, what took place after that. Some of the officers were hurt. There were some flower pots. Some of those items that were thrown were actually terracotta flower pots. And they look much different now. They look like babies, but I recognize Lieutenant Lozanne in there and some of the officers now that have been here, 25 years. They look quite different now, grown up, so.
And Silver, that was a time when there was, that was not the only incident of that type. That there was quite a few of those confrontations happening over that time period. And so whether or not it happened at that time, there were other times where there certainly was a stronger police response depending on circumstances.
Yeah.
So,
I'd heard about it, so this was the first time I saw it. but-
Yeah, that's just a snippet from the, they call it the Vortex Riot.
Right.
And the person that filmed it is one of also the people that was interviewed in that If a Tree Falls. It was Tim Lewis, and so he's the narrator and filmmaker.
And he used to do Cop Watch, right?
Yeah. I ran into him the other day and said hi to him, and asked him. He was actually at the Women's March, but he wasn't marching. He was just riding his bike around, kind of looking at things. And I asked him, "Hi Tim, how are you?" And he said, "Great, how are you?" And we have a different relationship now than we did in the 90s. But I asked him why he wasn't marching, and he says he's gotten too old for that now. So, yes.
I'd just like to point out the multiplicative effect of that bank that we were talking about, because when you take a withdrawal and then you make a deposit, it's not, you don't get back up to where you were.
Oh, no. It probably takes 10 deposits or more to equal the withdrawal. It's unfortunate, but that's right.
Good. Anybody have anything else? Thank you.
Yep.
Appreciate
you're
your
welcome.
time.
Good night, you guys.
Good night.
Step out. See you later.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
This name was the reporter from that story, Joe Kidd. I don't know if it's the same person or not.
I did have some concerns about the mustaches and the sunglasses. So hopefully those don't come back.
Yeah. That's policy now.
Take a vote on lashes first.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's move on, and we'll turn it over to Director James for his report.
I apologize for being late. I was in a meeting with the city manager. You know how they are. We were having a very positive
Tough to have a
meeting.
boss, huh?
Yeah, it's nice to have a good boss. I don't have a whole lot to share with you tonight. I am going to update a few slides for you that we showed you last time, and a couple that we did not show you. I talked about them. Before I do that, I just want to give you a quick update of the chief search. It is right on. Everything is on schedule. The consultants were here and at the end of January to make the first kind of review and reducing the candidate pool to another level, and they've since then done a lot of the hard work of assessing the backgrounds of all the candidates that were still left, and they have also participated in some rigorous exercises that test their that assess their ability to communicate both in writing and in speaking, and to assess their ability to reason on many issues. And so those things will be reviewed in the coming weeks by a team of the city manager, and from that probably then we'll have a finalist pool, and we're hoping, the manager is hoping and planning for sometime in early March to conduct interviews. So the process is moving right along. We still have some strong candidates in that pool. From my standpoint, I've been riding patrol when I could. I don't have a lot of time for that, but I've had several occasions to do that. And I've been impressed with the knowledge of the people I've been with and the view of the city. Amazingly, you don't know what to expect. I don't go into these encounters it's a kind of informal. I don't have an agenda. I want to listen. And very positive people. They're positive about their job. They're positive about their community. And I've ridden with Lieutenant and Sergeant thus far. I haven't gotten to the officer level yet. I don't know if I will, because we have a lot going on. But I was impressed with how much they care about the community. I will say, and I wanted to say this while Julie was still here, walking downtown, 3 times I've encountered officers walking. And just today, coming from the executive manager's meeting, I encountered another officer, and every contact I've had, it's just to greet them, but every one of them offered without any effort on my part to try to extract information from them. They offered how much they liked their job and how much they like to work with the people downtown, and they like making a difference. Isn't that interesting? And so that's a success story in that. Real quickly, I'll update you on just about 3 or 4 slides. Remember last time, we're going to be making a presentation to our council on February the 20th. This is part of the Community Justice Initiative. And actually, I got that there. This is part of the Community Justice Initiative. Last time I showed you how our service demand was going up and how our resources to meet that demand have not grown with the challenge of that growing demand with population and such. So one of the things I told you about was that we unfortunately have a number of calls that we don't get to because of the volume of calls that are coming in, the greater time that officers are spending on call, doing some of the things that are very much part of the 21st century policing plan to de-escalate, and the things that were described tonight in terms of procedural justice, it takes more time. And that's a good thing. But that does back up some of the calls, and then we're having more volume, less time to do self-initiated work. But this represents, and we went through the data quite a bit, this represents calls that are on the low level of things that we are contacted about through dispatch. Many of these, because they're low level, and because we don't have, the calls are stacking up, and we can't get to them. They're sometimes disregarded by a patrol supervisor, sometimes by a dispatch supervisor. These things are sitting out there 4 or 5 hours, and we can't get to them. There's such things as a motor vehicle, very minor motor vehicle accidents, things where we have to tell people, well, would you call back later? And they don't call back. We feel on a lot of those don't. They're very low level things. If you look at the numbers there, in 2014 we had about 60 of those abandoning on an average daily basis, and now we have 80. That's a 36% increase. That's very significant. And so just to that's 22.8% of all of our public initiated unavailable to respond calls by year. I showed you this slide with just the public initiated calls last time. Now this folds into that. It's just part of the same column, but almost a quarter of the calls are received in that category we are not able to respond to. We just can't get to them. This is not satisfactory to our dispatchers, who are quite stressed out about having a call screen that is going way past their the screen on there, and they have to go up. They know they got things down there they can't get to because it prioritizes. And then our officers who don't really want to ignore anything, but they don't have the time. There's not enough of them out there. And so I only show this to you just to give you some idea of the fact that these are things that we wish we could improve on, and it will probably require some more resources over a period of years to do that. This is not something we're going to put in the presentation for our counselors here. This will not be in our presentation that we do on the 20th. What these are some of the good things that we've been doing, where even though our resources haven't grown, we haven't had any more staffing, we've been able to reallocate resources to a number of very positive initiatives, and you will hear officers say they're positive. These are some of the things that help reduce the social crime, society crimes that we saw that were going down, some of the things that help move things out of downtown and probably disperse some of that and moved it out. And so, and this slide has information in it that was not intended to be shared. This is more of for us in order to look at our issue. The footnote's the most important thing. In order to do this type of work, we have to pull resources out of our patrol and sometimes our investigative ranks. This reduced the individuals who are available for first responders, and we have to meet minimum patrol standards by contract, and so officers have to be retained on their after shift, call in early for shift, or even call in their time off, and that's overtime. That has a real monetary value that I'm hoping we can assess while I'm still here. This is a timeline we'll be showing, and what you saw last time was the society crimes all of a sudden dropped from 2016, 2017. It's because a lot of initiatives. It works. We had to put some real resource out there, and this wasn't just us. These are initiatives that involved our partners in the city and services, and so this was a combination of all the city services that could contribute to it. Again, there's some information on here that's not absolutely correct, but this is a slide in draft form that will be updated before we get there on the 20th. But the good thing is things have happened, and we want to celebrate that, and we want to do those things. Officers know they make a difference. I'm going to have a tour of the community court. You talk about people proud of something they do. Central Services came in. And I know that they'll do this for the new chief to tell me about all who they are. And when they started about community court, they wanted me to be there, and they were so proud of it and the things they accomplished there, and it helps reduce further calls for service. This will not be in your presentation either, but this is analysis that we did from a study. We took a study that's called the Benchmark City study. There's about 25 agencies across the country that participate in this data. We've drawn some of the data from it. We picked a range of data from about 156,000, 190,000 on population, and we're just going to look comparison where Eugene is there, and we're right in the middle of that particular array. And what you see there is our authorized officer strength currently is 192. We have 166.5 population for 2016. This is 2016. How many officers per citizen? Well, if you look across there, we don't have the highest officers per citizen. It's 867.6. You got to look at our population too. Officers per 1,000 citizens. I know citizens per officer, excuse me, citizens per officer. We have 867 citizens per officer. So that, again, these are just ratios, just to talk about how our service responders are proportionate to the people we provide services for. If you look at the other way, the officers per 1,000 citizens, well, we're the lowest on that chart there. How many first responders do we have? First responders, there's an asterisk. Those are individuals who are available to actually respond to a call for service. This, in our case, is patrol officers. Authorized today in patrol are 95 positions. Actual, there's only 80 available. And of those 80, and that's just 80 people in working patrol, answering calls, responding, those aren't available every day because they may be off of training, they may be sick. So there's a lot of reasons why people are not available. They may be on workman's comp time, they may be on sick leave, vacation. So at any one time right now we have 80. First responders for 1,000 citizens, if you look at that there, we're on the low end of that. The calls for service actually are not too bad out of line. Now Peoria, one thing we can't do with this particular comparative data is there's a lot of demographic differences. Economic, Peoria is a much different city. Grand Prairie, Texas, I am very familiar with, and grew up in that area and know the people who work there quite well. Calls for service per 1,000, well, we're right there, but Grand Prairie has quite a bit more population than we do, and we're right there with them. And the calls for service per first responder, what this is an indication of is how many calls each first responder is answering throughout the year. And that number is on the high end of that. We would like to have, and we're looking to see if we can get some information from Salem and Portland. They don't like we don't participate in this particular survey. And just so you have something locally. I just wanted to share those with you. That's kind of the update. We look forward to being with our counselors to make that presentation along with municipal courts. We'll be making that presentation with them. Christy Hammond will be facilitating that. We had a really good meeting today to be sure that we can frame this discussion with y'all in a way that's simple and to understand. And I appreciate that we have the opportunity. I appreciate what y'all do. I'll probably be with you one more time, and that will be the last time, and then hopefully we'll have you a new chief in here to serve you and work with you full time. Thank you.
Any questions of the director?
I'd just like to encouraged to continue to divert low-priority calls. Bike thefts, I had somebody came to my porch, took a couple small items. You know, there was a good process for filling out a report online and having a non-emergency report. So, I mean, sure, it's always nice when an officer can respond, but I accept that they got bigger fish to fry. And so, but it made me feel at least like I was doing my part as well to add that report, and then there is somebody back here who can correlate and say, oh, you know what, we've had 3 other reports on that street, maybe that is worth doing that. So I think that's a way of actively engaging the public that is efficient in the use of police time.
It's a very important way of engaging the public in terms of building trust. If you talk about procedural justice, the procedure of being able to respond to a call and talk to an officer in person is a process that has to do with procedural justice, a fairness that comes to the fact that we realize you're a victim and we've heard your story. That's very important. And one of the reasons we believe that the property crime reports are going down, and there is a national trend on that, is that across the country, sometimes those are going down because of new systems where calls are being handled, like minor theft calls, you do them online, or businesses have to self-report, like Walmart, large big box stores. Much of that has to do with people don't call because they don't believe you'll do anything. And the very example that you gave of the windows being broken on your street, by the way, I hope you don't mind I shared that story, those stories with a few of the staff, because we feel that. The officers experience that. Our dispatchers, our communications, they get that, and it stresses them when they can't see the bottom of their screen, and they have to run it up 2 screens. That many queues in there. It's like the end basket that never you keep taking things off the top of the pile, but it keeps growing faster. You can pull it out, and so we know that is a trust builder to be there and do that, and nobody wants it to be that way. So we have an opportunity to look at that and maybe to do a little better job with that. And it's a decision of resource allocation that every community faces at some time or another, and so we hope we can communicate that. I appreciate that so much.
Do we have a good method of letting folks know about that non-emergency awareness? I'm just not aware. Like when you call 911, does it say, if this isn't an emergency, please go?
For many people call and they're told that when they're called, the dispatchers do try to convey to them that right now we don't have anybody who will answer that call. We'll get to you as soon as we can. Those kind of messages are put out there. Many times, I can't remember if I told you all the story of the lady who was doing the deaf interpretation of the State of the City address. She came up to me afterwards. Somebody must have pointed her out. You pointed her out because you met me. No,
she came to me, asked me
okay.
a question about police that I couldn't answer.
A sweet citizen of your city. And she asked, she first was enamored by my Texas accent, and then she engaged me in can I talk to you? And what she wanted to tell me was that she has a business near Whitebird. It's her home. It's her second business, an antique business. And y'all probably know her, so I probably shouldn't have identified her so well, but she said she was broken into and some items were taken. She called us, and they told her to, because of the nature there was no evidence, they couldn't really do anything. When we got there, we probably couldn't do anything with it. If she'd do an online report, she agrees to do this, and I don't know how people are. I'm in my 7th decade, about to enter my 8th, and a lot of people in the 8th decade aren't always that good at doing online things. So I thought that was, well, she had to do that. She did it, and she never heard a thing.
That's what she told me.
And so her story to me was a disappointment, and I had to share my disappointment and share with her that nobody here will have it be that way. That we don't like that. That's not what we want to do. And then here's the clincher. She says, and indicating obviously her past husband, he had passed rather, he was a Corvallis police officer. So she didn't have a problem with police. She had a problem with service. That story is there. That's about the trust, and that we want to build. And everybody that I've talked to in working on this project, nobody is satisfied with that, and we all want to do better. So, thank you for the time.
Anything else? Good, thank you, Director. So we'll move on to our policy topic of unmanned aerial device. Sergeant Williams will join us.
Hello.
You didn't bring your,
No,
Toy today?
I didn't bring it again, sorry.
we ran out of time last time
got
to
to see it
actually
last
make
time.
it fly.
Yeah.
Yeah, we got to see it. but-
I'm hoping that maybe at the, Will and I were talking, that maybe at the work group in May, we can maybe try to be set up enough to be able to do a little better demo. We had a pretty productive city departments meeting today where the heads of each, or managers of each of the city departments came together with a tech or one of their subject matter experts and talked about ways of formulating a work group going forward to standardize some of the policies and procedures and being able to work interdepartmentally with drone teams, UAV teams. And so we walked away from that with a pretty good picture moving forward. And we're having another meeting here in a few weeks to work on that policy. Not policy, but SOP. So we're on the same page about maintenance and pre-flight, post-flight reporting and all that stuff. So pretty cool group coming together that's on a fast track to get everybody aligned and move forward. So that'll be pretty interesting. So my hope at the end of today, especially since we have a quorum, thank you for popping in, is hopefully to have a vote to move this forward from police commission so that I can move forward to our senior staff and see if we can at least start the baby steps of implementing this policy in the next near future, hopefully. With that, as things have evolved, and since I'll be asking for a final vote here, there are a couple of areas that I want to modify that you have in your packets here that weren't discussed by commission members last time, and so a couple little tweaks that I want to just throw out there that I don't think you'll have any issues with, but I don't want to change them without you guys knowing about it after voting on it. From my perspective. So the first one is the line that talks about the police department purchasing systems. We've got some creative ideas in the works, and the police department may or may not have to actually make any purchases to be able to be operational. I'm picking up a machine from Risk Services tomorrow or next week, hopefully, that I'm hoping to be able to work into an interdepartmental agreement with, and we're at least gonna be hands-on it to see the capabilities and whatnot for some testing, early testing at least. So I'm gonna just strike that whole section out, and that'll allow us to be more flexible without having to make policy.
You're talking about the
modifications.
top section on the pilot program?
Just the one sentence that says EPD shall purchase and maintain at least 3 devices, because it may not be that we're purchasing, we may have some other creative options for obtaining
Right.
devices.
Should we include may purchase?
Or
I
shall,
think
you could say shall secure and maintain, but.
Yeah, but to have a program, we're gonna have to have devices, so I don't know that it's really necessary to even say it. It's kind of included, that we're gonna have at least 1 or 2. And so, I like the simplicity of just removing it if everybody's okay with that.
And I understand why you'd want to remove it. I guess the only question I have with that, is there anything else in the policy that says that somebody can't use their own? Because that would be what I would not really like to have in a policy.
That kind of goes, I would have to dig into some APM stuff, but we don't use our own equipment for police department operations. I mean, that would go against everything EPD.
Right, and that's why there may be something embedded somewhere that says that, but I just want to make sure that.
Yeah, that wouldn't be allowed.
For employees, if you don't mind, if the employee's property were to be damaged, then the city would be in a we wouldn't have to, but it would be appropriate for us to pay for that, and so we just don't allow that. Most departments wouldn't allow it.
So then, front page, and I'm just gonna go through the changes from last time to try to speed us through. We've had a mixture of folks, so hopefully those that haven't been here with us for all three discussions will have had some time to kind of look at them. We didn't have any notes made from page 2. That brings us to 1208.6, page 3, and that's where we come to EPD allowed pilot program use. And there was a fantastic observation that we didn't have public outreach on there. And obviously we want to be able to fly it for public outreach so we can do community engagement. And then I got to thinking, I was like, well, dumb me, we don't have training allowed either. So you'll notice that public outreach and training have been added there as a kind of obvious give me activities. So there was some discussion about what was D, it's now F, and that's the chief of police allowance for critical incidents essentially. And I chewed on the or designee portion of that as well, because for the purpose of this, the bar is high for when we would utilize this piece of equipment during the pilot project. The problem is that placing it solely on the chief of police, then there's some, if the chief isn't here, somebody else is acting, but they're not technically the chief. And so my position at this point, I think, is to add the designee back. So it'll be chief of police or designee. And obviously the program coordinator, so the direct supervisor, has the ultimate say on whether or not a mission is or isn't flown. And so hypothetically that would be me. And having a pretty high level of visibility on everything. I think that we'll be able to roll out through training, through the leadership team, what that very high level is for us. It's not going to be any barricaded person. Oh, and so it really is life safety incidents. So I think it's better to add the designee, so there's a little bit of flexibility in there, and it goes along the lines of more of our the way we write things usually, and hope that the rest of that is clean enough to show that that bar is high for those other types of incidents for what's allowed. Any thoughts or concerns there? Okay. And in the absence of an argument against, I'm going to go ahead and make the adjustments. I'm going to assume that those are approved or whatnot for the adjustments that I'm proposing. And then the only other spot that we had was under equipment, 120810. And that was pointing out that the lighting equipment would be activated. I continue to struggle with this one a little bit because there's a certain amount of, until we have equipment and we can do some testing, I don't know for sure that we're going to be able to make that work logistically. You're talking about adding bits and pieces and additional weight and more wires that have complexity. There's just some technical parts of that need to be, that I don't know. The work group today, interdepartmental work group, there's a glowing consensus about ensuring that all city drones are clearly labeled and marked, probably with tail numbers in as large of numbers as possible. We talked about like the vinyl wrap kits that you can get that clearly show that if somebody pulls out their binoculars, it's going to be obvious that it's a City of Eugene device, and probably with clear markings for which department it is. And that the high visibility is also a priority and a strong interest amongst all the city departments. So that's one where you can see what I added in there, when possible. And then the reality is though that we need to have a little bit of room for that extreme safety component where it may be that safety concerns dictate that we're not activating every light that we have possible. And so while the norm would be that that we're utilizing that we don't shoehorn ourselves into having to violate the policy if we have a pretty legitimate reason to not be utilizing it. Because every now and again, the police need to be a little bit sneaky to keep everybody safe. And I know the public doesn't like it. That's why I have this in here and trying to be there, but at the same time, need to be careful about shoehorning ourselves into a position where we have to violate the policy to keep people safe. I hope that comes across as I'm trying to.
Yeah, could you give me an example as to why it might not be needed or necessary?
Our violent crimes unit is out searching for a triple homicide suspect, and they're tailing them or watching a residence, and the person's said they're not going to go out without a blaze of glory, and the front door on the residence is really hard to get eyes on without putting somebody in a tricky position. It might be something where the chief would authorize that we put one out at a distance to be able to watch a door rather than having somebody exposed or in a tough position. So we may not want to be broadcasting that we're utilizing it in that circumstance, but.
And these deactivations would be justified in the post-op?
Oh, yeah, we'd certainly be documenting in the documentation.
Just in terms of the equipment, are there any little kits out there to add these kinds of lights?
Depending on the machine, there are some. I was actually looking stuff up the other day. But a lot of them are forward-facing. Some of them have mixed reviews. There's stuff out there. It's just I can't say 100% we're going to be able to deliver on this promise, or that it's going to be effective and worth the hassle, depending on what the size and the brightness and the lifespan of the batteries and I mean all of that. There's just a lot of unknowns that come along with the technology, and so I want to make sure that it's that we have a little bit of wiggle room there to try our best.
I might suggest, since we're going to do this for a pilot project and we not violate the policy, that instead of saying the EPD name and logo or the City of Eugene name and logo, we really have a great opportunity to share resources, which I think is important in cities today. And there's so many uses for this. That's why they're putting together a team. I think Sarah Maderi is heading that up, a multidiscipline group. And so while we're in a pilot, we're not buying our own. They may not want us to put the PD on the ones being used for planning and parks. So we know this says the City of Eugene. Would y'all be open to that for the pilot program? And then when we come back to the full operational, assuming that it works, it's approved, then we'd look, and part of that time we'd have more information about whether we could do a more sophisticated lighting and.
Yeah, once we get through the pilot project, we should be pretty well dialed on all of these things and be able to have, or at least be able to report back with what our capabilities are. And I like that because in the event of a major emergency, it's possible that we could be calling parks or some other pilots out to come help us out, especially in a pilot where we have limited certified pilots and skill sets and equipment and whatnot. So Eugene / or city logo, just that they're properly marked to identify as city or police property.
I think you wordsmith pretty well, so it's been my experience.
I just want to make sure I'm getting that the and or is it would be inappropriate.
Yes.
We just want the city of Eugene on there, whether it's the police department or the city.
Put our logo on it.
Easy enough.
Scott has a question.
I just think on this additional lighting too, I know that they have the red and the green for the operator to be able to see the front and back, and could this be confusing for the operator if you put additional, especially blue and green lights?
Not with training. I mean, you wouldn't want to like turn it on for the first time and go run a mission, but that's where getting experience with identifying and the reality is that between the screen, the remote, and the machine itself, line of sight, and the combination of them all, it's I don't and wouldn't anticipate that being a problem.
Marty, question?
I'm sorry, is this going to be limited to line of sight?
Yeah, FAA requires,
FAA,
yeah.
that's it. The other thing was just a suggestion that you talked about warrant use as part of the pilot. We're probably going to want to use at least something with the judges because this is going to make them nervous. And the first time, you don't want to be explaining it the first time when you're actually seeking a warrant for an ongoing situation. So.
There's a lot of relationship building that will need to take place here. Air traffic control, the Eugene Airport, the circuit court, the DA's office, because if we use it for an exigent circumstance, we have to file a report within 48 hours of the circuit court. The judges for some awareness about warrant language for the use of them. The list goes on and on. There's a lot of work to be done to actually, we won't be operational. It will take months to actually be operational at anything other than a pretty basic capacity.
And it did just occur to me, in terms of mutual aid, are other, because once you have it, other people want to play with it. Are there those sort of reciprocal agreements with Springfield and county? Those are the two that jump to mind.
The county's search and rescue has one. They don't have any of the authorizations to be able to fly it, and it's been sitting on a shelf collecting dust for some time. But they're hoping soon to file, to get on board. They're waiting for Lynn County so they can kind of model their stuff after Lynn County. I haven't reached out to Springfield yet, so I'm not sure where they're at with it. The mutual aid is a great question. The problem with this isn't the purchase of equipment. The equipment one-time costs are fairly manageable. The problem is the ongoing cost of mostly people. And so that's the bigger concern of trying to keep a handle on that, because we don't have a line item budget for this. This comes out of all of our other capacities. And so that's the big concern here, because anywhere you look at it, anybody I talk to in the department can tell me how great this will be for what they do, because it has this capability of enhancing so much of what we do in a lot of different ways. But the problem is that also that speaks to hours, and hours is capacity, and it's regular time capacity, and then it's after hours overtime, and it adds up pretty quickly. So we got to be really, really careful, and mutual aid is one of those that's been identified as a concern, because odds are the calls are going to start rolling in, and it's hard to, we're going to have to tell people no probably at times. So that's an angle that we need to work on. And again, it adds to that list of the kinks to work out and the relationships to foster and cultivate, and figure out how we can work together to start rolling down this road.
I have a queue going. I'll put you in the queue, Sean. I have Will, Claire, and then Sean. So, Will, you're up.
Yeah, just a curiosity question. Would you consider the visual observer a member of the team?
Not necessarily. It could be anybody.
Okay.
Yeah. It really, there's not much to the visual observer role other than
Right.
somebody that can pay attention.
It has to be a police employee.
Yeah. And there's possibility down the road that we figure out a way to utilize volunteers. It doesn't need to be, in fact, the team members don't necessarily need to be sworn police officers. They could be EPA represented, non-sworn employees. So there's, I would say with this program, everything's on the table, and any way that we can be creative to maximize our capacity and effectiveness while minimizing our reduction in other services and impacts to other teams. I think we've got a lot of people that are very definitely thinking creatively about how we can do this while not having a negative impact everywhere else. Or hopefully city council will find a little pot of money to help support it.
No, that's up to the new chief.
So I have Claire and then Sean.
Well, just on the question of the mutual aid, I mean, it seems now, just from things I read in the paper, thinking of a scenario like someone's, there's a rescue in the river, multiple agencies will respond, and this might be a tool that could be helpful in a scenario like that. So, I mean, I can see emerging situations where, assuming the team can be assembled, the mutual aid would be something you guys already do, and now you'd have this extra added piece of equipment to assist. So, I mean, I know you got to balance
Yeah, and the issue is
those other factors.
Yeah, from what in the discussions that I've been having, the concern is less about whether or not we would be able to help. It would be what is the cost of that help. So if it's Friday night and we've got to call 2 people out in order to assist, versus if it's 2 in the afternoon and 2 of us are already working and can go respond. So it's not a reluctance to help other people. It's being the larger, more capable, more equipped agency in the area. We oftentimes assist our partnering agencies up and down the valley with different things. And we don't always get a lot of reciprocal assistance because we don't require it so much.
Right.
And so it's a matter of just balancing that cost and what our capacity truly is to add one more tool to be helping everybody out with.
Right.
So it's just walking down doing the balance beam of being sustainable and yet still helping when and where we can and being reasonable.
Director, did you want to address this
Just
specifically?
one real quick thing. One other thing on the mutual aid, because not every community is willing to have this kind of tool, which is one of the reasons why we're being careful how we approach this. I don't think it would happen, but if we were asked for mutual aid and that city hasn't really surveyed or they know that the people in the community wouldn't want that, or to say Springfield, they didn't want in their community, even though the police might request us, we might be a little reluctant to respond to that. But I'm a firm believer in mutual aid, and because what we give, we also get, and I believe in that. I don't know what they feel like. We might have to have some agreement about that before we did it. But everything you pointed out was right.
Yeah, and I thought about that too, which is why I thought of the scenario of the river, something that's, there's cities on both sides of that. And because you're right, Springfield might not want us flying our drone into.
Yeah,
probably they
there.
wouldn't, but it's something we'd have to think.
And it's situational. I mean, the odds of us maybe making a leap of faith and hoping the public accepts it, if it's a potential life-saving measure, we're going to be more willing to take that leap than if it's an investigative assistance or a covert operation request. And it becomes a steep line on how quickly, willingly we're going to jump to go help somebody else. So,
Thank you.
Sean?
So to add to those kinks that you mentioned earlier, the community relation aspect. I work near the Valley River Center, and they were doing surveying of their parking lot for some sort of remodel. A whole bunch of homeless people hang out under the bridge. We're getting pretty agitated that there was a drone flying above them. So I was wondering if this observer would also have the neutral role of, community liaison.
A visual observer, for the purpose of a flight, is attached to the hip to the pilot to help to make sure that they don't run into something, or that birds don't start dive bombing it, or that some other aircraft comes in and then we need to land it to get out of the way of a manned aircraft. So that's very much an active participant in the operation that's taking place. It's not required, but it's certainly something that if we can afford the body to assist, that is certainly a good thing to have. The community outreach piece is going to be every opportunity at every turn that I can come up with and to engage folks and to share that it's a pretty non-threatening item. I wish you were here last month so that you could see. I brought mine to pass around the table, and then we had a good discussion about the community outreach plan for the police commission, and there is kind of a plan for the police commission doing a community outreach piece as well. If we can get our pilot up and running and make this happen. So.
Anything else? Is that all the changes within the policy?
I believe so.
Okay. Does anybody have any other questions or comments?
No, I'll just move to approve the policy.
I'll second.
Could you make your motion to accept his changes you recommended tonight?
Yeah, so I move to accept the changes.
Yeah.
Or I could say as amended.
Yeah.
Okay.
And with that equipment lighting section with some with the discussions that we've had, a little bit of flexibility for me to wordsmith that some more to create some room for technical stuff.
Understood. Good second.
Best way to keep them out of my having a hard time.
You said you were good at words.
You're better on paper.
Any other discussion for the motion? That all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? You're good to go.
All right.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks for all the time looking at it, talking about it. Helping us out.
Okay, so we move into our last piece, which is our outreach and engagement, and Scott is going to lead that. We have a memo that was sent out with the packet.
Thanks Carter for helping out with the memo that we sent out. Just as part of cleaning up those lines of communication with the city manager and the city council. I think we did that last month. That works out great. Is now just improving our communication with the public and being a sounding board at times so that they have a voice, and that allows us to be a better resource to the city council and the city manager. So just 3 items is what I came up with. I thought we'd start small with some sort of social media presence that could be linked to the city's Facebook page and also the police department's page. It could be monitored by the commission as well as Carter with some help. And it'll serve mainly not to answer questions necessarily about police or anything, but it could be to direct those inquiries to the proper channels, and then also for us to be able to put our meeting schedules out, locations, policy, when we're reviewing policies and such. And then the second item would be for us to attend all the neighborhood meetings for the year 100%, so that they know who the commissioners are and be able to take what they are talking about back to the commission as a whole, to be able to articulate that and start measuring things. I don't know what will come from that. And then last, just a meeting downtown I think would be great, a different location. Just as some folks believe that the police is not a friendly environment, maybe coming to the police department for a meeting hinders some of that. Being downtown, we have a lot of public meetings down there. It might be an option for us to hold one meeting, at least in the summer, maybe at the library as a suggestion. So I just wanted to kind of get that out there and see what your thoughts are. I appreciate the opportunity to share that with you.
Marty, start us out.
Sounds good to me. I'm happy to take the 3 South Eugene. I'll talk to Carter about it. But my suggestion would be that we volunteer for the ones that are going to be easiest for us to get to.
Anybody else? Any other?
Yeah, so this was sort of what my idea was last year with the subcommittee that we had. I met with the Centro Latino Americano board this month on behalf of the police commission, just as a person who was there to be a presence. And I would like to make sure that we hit those organizations as well, organizations that are in the community that are doing the advocacy or the the different places that I feel have issues with the police department that we should be reaching out to. NAACP, LULAC, Centro. So just as a person who was there observing, I think it was a good opportunity. I was able to answer some questions just about what we do as commissioners, and I think it was by and large a good meeting.
Great. I'd like to maybe we could drop a list of those different associations and organizations that we want to attend, and maybe publish that as part of our packet so that we can see who attended, and that way when we do the commissioner comments, if they're not there, maybe the next month we could ask for a report out of what they heard at the meetings. And that way we can assure the 100% as well as the goal.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Anybody, any other? Claire?
Yeah, I think this is a good plan. It's not overly ambitious, practical, and focused, I think, on some good touch points. The social media being an obvious one that takes some management, and so I appreciate the note that this would also reroute things that ended up there that needed to go to more appropriate places. And I like the idea of meeting at the library. I think that's an excellent suggestion. And then a public outreach work session. I've struggled as this committee over the years has thought about this aspect of it, and serving on budget committee, we have the same conversations, and there's no magic answer. So I think just coming up with a plan that seems like you can actually do it, actually can follow through on your plan and see how it goes, see what kind of results you have, and then reevaluate and either do it all again next year or add more things. I think that's the right approach. Just get started on it and see what kind of results you get.
Anyone else?
Do we have any volunteers to help with the social media site?
I think Edward was going to do it.
I was hoping he would.
I remember an email about that, but he's been under the weather, I understand.
We have some
No,
restrictions
we
and
can
some
vote it.
challenges that we have to overcome there, but I think it's manageable.
I do want to say, by and large, the groups that I'm going to be reaching out to are groups that know me, and it's kind of pointless for me to be showing up as a commissioner to answer the same questions that maybe others might be able to show up to. I know Marty's going to be quite busy with his run, so I'm not going to just expect that he's going to be able to reach out to the neighborhood association meetings that I could also do. So I'm going to try to piggyback up on those. But if anybody wants to have, when we had the subcommittee, I did reach out to some organizations and did set up some potential meetings with other commissioners. So I'd be willing to share that information and set up a good time or be a good liaison for those two to happen.
That'd be great. Anything else? Anybody else? Comments? Good. Well, so we'll try to we'll get some information out about some of the other groups and then neighborhood groups, and it might be good to think about every month or every other month to try to get to one of them so you can come back and talk about them during the conference. So good. Well, that brings us to the end of our meeting then, and we'll just quickly go around the table with commissioner comments, and I'll start with you, Claire, this time.
Okay.
Go around. if
Thank
don't
you.
mind.
Well, welcome, Sean. Very glad to have you here. You'll get caught up. Don't worry about that. And I want to thank Director James again for being here and for your leadership. I had the opportunity to have coffee with the president of the EPDEA, and he spoke very highly of you.
That's good.
And told me that he wished you'd stay. So, and that I think you said to him, my wife would kill me. So, so that was very encouraging, even though you are interim, and there's no changing that. I think your service here has been very positive and will continue to be until it's through. And so I just really want to thank you for that.
I appreciate that very much. Will?
Welcome to Sean. And thanks to Scott for doing hard work that I wouldn't have wanted to do. I appreciate it.
Thank Carter.
Thank you.
Chris?
Welcome, Sean. I've never met you before, so welcome aboard. No other comments?
Marty?
Just thanks to Sergeant Williams. It's a bit of a moving target with something this contentious and difficult, and I appreciate all the work.
Well, I'm kind of sad you'll be leaving right after I meet you.
Well, I haven't had a chance to formally meet you, but I'll introduce myself later.
And I am really happy that, social media was one of the first things that I thought of when I thought of applying to this. So now I'll have to figure out my next idea.
Welcome, and No comment? Addition?
Welcome, Sean. I would like to thank the director again. I'm always pleased to see your charts. You only bring a few of them each month, but I think they're probably the most important charts we've seen in a long time, because it really makes it evident of, that our city and call volumes and needs out there have grown, and our department has sort of sat at its same level. And I think that's something that we can try to help with. Scott?
Well, welcome again as well. It's great having a full house, and looking forward to working with you over the next 3 years or so. And thanks for the presentations from both your staff and yourself. They're very good tonight, so thanks a lot.
Director, any closing comments?
Thank you for the opportunity. Appreciate the work that you do. Nice to have you on board, and we'll see you again next month, hopefully. But I appreciate it very much.
Good. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for everyone for coming. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Bill.
Everybody have a good evening.
So is this the Joe Kidd that was the writer?
What was that?
So in that